Today we're going to talk about Spanish football. For a very long time, Spanish clubs, Real Madrid and Barcelona, dominated European football, but that domination has come to an end. English clubs contested the finals of both the Europa League and the Champions League last year, and the Champions Cup game between Chelsea and Liverpool on Wednesday night in Istanbul. No Spanish team in it, and very little interest in it, I understand, in Spain. However, things are really fascinating in Spain, in particular at Real Madrid and Barcelona. And we're joined now from Barcelona by Richard Fitzpatrick. Richard is an Irish journalist working in Spain, and he's going to bring us the latest news. Richard, the situation at Real Madrid becomes more bizarre by the day. Zinedine Zidane, a very respected, one of the most respected people in football, as a player and a coach, 3-time winner of the Champions League with Real Madrid, yet he has all kinds of problems. They've had a terrible pre-season, and now he's fighting with a player, Luka Jovic, he bought from Serbia for 62 million just 2 months ago, and he's looking to put him out on loan. There is, of course, his long-running saga with Gareth Bale. What's going on at Real Madrid?
Yeah, the house is falling down. Zidane came in March in a very surprising rescue operation, returning to the club as manager. The club had its worst season this century, been knocked out of all 3 competitions by March. So he was given a lot of money at the start of this during the summer transfer window, and they spent 300 million bringing in these players, but these squad players, one of whom is Luka Jovic, the striker who was bought as a backup to Benzema. But he hasn't done well in the pre-season games. He's still only 21. He's a bet on the future. But there's a big problem at the club with goals. Obviously, since Cristiano Ronaldo left the season before last, he'd scored 50 goals a season for 9 seasons. Those goals have dried up, and Jovic isn't the solution. So he's out of favour with Zidane, and the season hasn't even started. There are problems all over the pitch with the club. In midfield, they're light on cover. They need a shake-up to that starting trio of Modric, Casemiro and Toni Kroos. And in defence, they've been leaking goals during those pre-season friendlies, 7 of them. They let in 18 goals. So there's big problems throughout Zidane's squad, and that's not to mention the problems off-field. He's trying to get rid of players he doesn't believe in, like Gareth Bale, as you mentioned, also James Rodriguez, and nothing is working out for him. His big request from the club president, Florentino Perez, was Paul Pogba. That deal hasn't happened, and the English transfer window is closed. So it's very, very unlikely to happen this summer, possibly further down the line. So it's not looking well for Zidane's prospects this season.
No, and there's also, it appears, a tug-of-war going on between Barcelona and Real Madrid for the services of Neymar, which is extraordinary when you consider what a great professional Zidane was, how respected he is, that he should want Neymar in coming into an already unstable situation is surprising. What's the story there?
Yeah, it's very, very surprising. It's a huge soap opera in Spain. It's been playing out over the last couple of months since it's become apparent that Neymar wants out of Paris. It's opportunity knocks for Real Madrid. They've had this disastrous summer in pre-season games. They haven't been able to get in Pogba because the price was too high that Manchester United were looking for. And now they see this opportunity with Neymar that he's available. He's one of, in talent, he's one of the 3 best players in the world alongside Messi and Ronaldo. He's a guy that it's seen could lift the gloom that's descended over the club over the last 12 months. But it's important to clarify he's not a Zidane request. Zidane doesn't never asked for him.
Right.
He's not a big fan of his. It's all about the president, Florentino Perez. However, if Zidane got him, would he complain? Of course not. It'd be such a quality player to bring into the squad, and it would address that problem of goals that they've been suffering from. But it would bring huge potential headaches as well because of his behaviour. It would upset the salary scale in the club. Neymar is on about 38 million net at Paris. He'd be on about the same at Madrid, which is more than twice the next guy in the squad, which would be Bale or Sergio Ramos. So there are a lot of question marks about that deal, and as to how it would work out.
Now, all those goals that Real Madrid conceded, 17, you say, in pre-season, it raises in my mind a question about Sergio Ramos, who you mentioned there, a great player for Madrid, a leader, captain of the club, a very influential person on the training ground and in the dressing room. But he is cracking on, and there were signs last season in particular that he was in decline. He's a huge figure there, isn't he?
He's a club legend. He's arguably Spain's greatest ever defender. He's won everything in the game. He's a man for the big occasion. Most memorably, that last-minute goal in the 2014 Champions League final against Atletico Madrid, which began this great cycle of recent success at the club. 4 Champions Leagues in 5 seasons. He's a Lionheart, brilliant in knockout stages of the Champions League. Great for Spain, but he's not a guy that's been doing it week in, week out for Real Madrid over the last few years. Kind of symptomatic of the decay or the decadence that has set in at the club. So he's, like you say, he's cracking on as well. He's 32, 33. There isn't much left in him. They need solidity in defence, and he's touching on a problem area for them. They've also got the issue of Marcelo, who's a clear favourite of Zinedine Zidane's, but he's got well-known defensive frailties. Again, they were exposed during the pre-season, and brilliant going forward. One of the great attacking defenders probably in the history of the game. But he's a real liability at full back. Zidane has been tinkering with his formation. He's been trying to play 3 at the back, 3 central defenders, and 2 wing backs in Marcelo and Dani Carvajal. That hasn't worked out. He had to switch halfway through their last game against Roma. So it's just shambolic, their defence at the moment. So it's a worry. Eder Militao was brought in from Porto, a Brazilian defender, but he's only played a handful of games, but he's not the solution either, it seems. So there's problems there for Zidane to address.
Now, across the city, Atletico Madrid, big rivals, they sold Griezmann to Barcelona in the summer. His contract, I think, had run out, and there was a buyout clause. It was a lot of money, and they've been spending money, particularly on a Portuguese player, João Felix, who is an outstanding young striker. Now, Simeone has a huge reputation in European football as a coach, and he's done a great job, there's no doubt, at Atletico, including in that great job a 7-3 defeat of Real in what I imagine was a pre-season friendly. It wasn't all that friendly, but it was a spectacular result. And he has Costa back there, who I understand is injured again.
Yeah, it's very interesting, the stuff that's happening at Atletico this summer. They've got all this money in because they've lost 3 key players from the squad. Griezmann, as you say, Barca paid 120 million for his buyout clause. They immediately spent that on buying in João Felix from Benfica. We'll talk about him in a second. They got in 80 million for Lucas Hernandez, also a buyout clause that Bayern Munich paid for their French World Cup winning defender. And they lost Rodri to Man City also for buyout clause of 70 million.
And they lost Diego Godin, who is a legend, who was a legend at the club, and that was a huge surprise. He was a great centre half, and really the leader of the team.
Definitely, he was Simeone's presence on the pitch. He was the beating heart of the team since he was there from 2010. A fantastic defender. His issue is part of the club policy. They don't renew players who are over 30, except for 1-year contract extensions. So he was one of the players that fell by the wayside. As a result, he moved to Inter Milan. Juan Fran and Felipe Luis on the two fullbacks. They also were in the same category. They've also been sold on to Brazilian clubs. So you had to Simeone had to bring in 4 new defenders to cover for the loss of those 3 guys over 30 and Lucas Hernandez. He had to replace Rodri in midfield. So he bought Marcus Llorente from Real Madrid, which is also agitating Real Madrid fans. And then he spent that 120 million that he got for Griezmann on João Felix, who's creating unbelievable excitement all across Spain for his performances pre-season. He's only 19. He had 1 season in the Portuguese Premier Division last season with Benfica. And he comes in that game, you mentioned the 7-3 defeat of Real Madrid. He was man of the match, scored a goal, provided 2 assists against Juve last week, facing off against his great compatriot Cristiano Ronaldo. He again lorded it in the game, scored the 2 goals that helped Atletico win 2-1. He's a classic number 10. He can play across midfield as well, but really exciting player. So the club, it was a huge gamble paying that kind of money for a 19-year-old. It's the 4th largest transfer fee in the history of football. But it's something that Atletico have done occasionally over the years. They spent 30 million for a 17-year-old Sergio Aguero back in the day.
Yes.
It was huge money. They did the same thing with Antoine Griezmann 5 years ago. So they can't do this every season, but they've done it this year. And it looks as if it could be money very well spent.
Now, Griezmann has gone to join Barcelona with Lionel Messi there as really the most important presence in the club, on the field and I imagine off the field, Richard. And Barcelona are very seriously trying to capture Neymar, and they sent a representative, I see, to Paris. He got no joy, and as we talk, Neymar is still a PSG player, although not a very popular one. What's happening with Barca in terms of this arrival of Griezmann will present its own problems, because fitting into that team and, if you like, cohabiting with Messi isn't always that easy, is it?
No, it touches on what's happening with Real Madrid's pursuit of Neymar as well. The Neymar idea of him going to Barca is all about opportunity as well. It's just surface that he wants to leave the club. So the president, Bartomeu, sees a possibility in getting him in. From a squad composition, it just seems crazy, because you've already got problems trying to accommodate their star players. You've got a frontline trio of Messi, Suarez and Griezmann, but you've also got Dembélé, who's been really good in pre-season, bought for 105 million, excluding add-ons. He's a big hope for the club over the next 5 or 7 years. So he's already looking for a place in that team. If you added Neymar into that mix, it just doesn't add up. So you'd create all kinds of problems with the players left out. You'd be lighten your midfield if you they're talking about playing the 4 of them in midfield, or the 4 of them up front, 4 of those 5. But it just doesn't make sense. But it's become about politics now, because it's a tussle between Barca and Madrid, Real Madrid. One of them is going to lose face. It seems that Neymar will be leaving Paris Saint-Germain. the official club store has even stopped selling Neymar merchandise. He's made it clear he's been agitating for a move out. He's been insubordinate, arriving a week back late for training during the summer. So he's doing all he can to get out of the club.
Yeah.
Now it's just an issue of where he will go, Madrid or Barca.
The situation of Philip Coutinho, who was a very successful player at Liverpool, very celebrated. They felt when they sold him to Barca that it might damage Liverpool. Going forward, it didn't, in fact, and he was replaced very successfully, and I don't think he'd find a place in the Liverpool team at the moment. Barca are trying everything they can to use him in bartering for other players, particularly with Neymar. They offered him to PSG, I understand. What's the situation with Coutinho now? Because your Spanish season starts this weekend, does it not?
Yeah, it does. Tomorrow, Barca play away in Bilbao against Athletic Bilbao. So Coutinho is on the outs. We've talked about those players they have up front: Griezmann, Messi, Suarez, and Dembele. So Coutinho is fifth in line for one of those starting positions up front.
Right.
And the club have been hawking him around Europe, trying to sell him. They've had talks with Spurs that fell through. Now they're trying to do him, try and get him in as a player exchange, and this is the only way it'll work for Barca. Trying to get Neymar is if they trade two players to Paris Saint-Germain, because they don't have money in the bank. They had to pay, to get out a 30 million loan just to get the Griezmann transfer over the line. There's also a possibility of Bayern Munich. If they're really tight-fisted in the transfer market, they're canny in this sense. They're waiting in the wings to see what happens with the Paris Saint-Germain move. If that falls through, they'll jump in, and they're possibly going to suggest a loan deal. They did this with James Rodriguez to take him on loan for 2 seasons.
Karl-Heinz Rummenigge said when Neymar went to PSG for 200 million, he said he'd rather build a new stadium for that kind of money.
He's a wise man. Yeah,
he is. But the situation with Coutinho is fascinating, because it just seems these clubs, both of them at the moment, who dominated Europe for so long, are so badly run that I think you mentioned the idea of a soap opera at the start of our conversation, Richard. Soap opera to the point of, Hollyoaks rather than our own fair city. Hollyoaks isn't great.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Like, if you look around Europe and you see the planning at Manchester City, Liverpool, they needed players. Liverpool needed a goalkeeper. They got in Alisson. They needed a centre defender. They got Van Dijk. And Manchester City have been so economical and strategic in getting in players for the building up this incredible squad. Even in Spain, Barcelona have been terrible over the last 5 or 6 seasons in their recruitment, but this season they have recruited well. They got in Frankie de Jong, who's been brilliant pre-season, fantastic midfielder, can play across midfield. His last game, he got in 8 interceptions. He's really, really quality player, and he'll be the future of that club probably for the next decade. They got in Griezmann, a world-class player up front, and they were one of their big weaknesses last season was in left back. They had no cover for Jordi Alba. He tired visibly at the end of the season. He was the big culprit in the defeat at Anfield for 2 of those goals they let in. So they got cover for him in now. So they've done well this pre-season in recruiting. But Real Madrid has been a shambles. Real Madrid doesn't even have a director of football or sporting director to coordinate transfer policy. And they sacked Jorge Valdano during the Mourinho years as manager. Mourinho and Valdano had a big fight. They never got on. So they haven't replaced him since. It's Florentino Perez is the sporting director of the club. It's crazy.
The rumour mill suggests that Zidane might walk or be pushed, and that Mourinho, the special one, might replace him. Is that idle speculation in the media, or is there some substance to it, do you think, Richard?
There's some substance to it. Look, we know the history with Real Madrid. They went through 3 coaches last season, and they don't have a long life expectancy at the club. Zidane knows this. He came in mid-season in 2015-2016, replacing Rafa Benitez. He knew if they didn't win the Champions League final that season that he would have got the axe.
Yeah.
So he knows that is hanging over him all the time. He did come back with a degree of political power because he rescued Florentino Perez in March. The club was the mob were at the gates, and they were baying for blood. Florentino sensationally brought Zidane back to rescue the situation. That bought Florentino Perez time. Zidane has huge status, but the rot is continuing to bedevil the club. So Zidane hasn't fixed the problems. What could unfold next season if things go badly again, as they have done the last 2 campaigns domestically, where they've been almost 20 points both seasons off Barca in the chase for the league title. Zidane will be on borrowed time. He could, there are a number of things that could happen. He could fall on his sword and resign. He could get the sack. That seems unlikely because he's got such huge status at the club. And he's got a very good relationship, very warm relationship with Florentino Perez. But his prospects won't be good. He's a man of honour. He'll tackle the problems. He'll make do with whatever squad he's given by the end of the transfer window, and he'll continue. He'll try and make it work. But his prospects won't be that good unless their form turns around, which isn't looking good at the moment.
Okay, and just a final question. And it's something I've asked you before, Richard, but last night we had the Champions Cup in Istanbul. 2 English clubs again contesting this really glorified friendly game. No Spanish interest whatsoever, I take it. The centre of gravity has well and truly shifted in the European game, has it not, for the moment?
It has definitely, particularly Liverpool and Manchester City. They're just such strong squads and really good, intelligent head coaches. Barca weren't a million miles away last season in the Champions League. They were outplayed over the 180 minutes by Liverpool, but they weren't too far off. They've reinforced well, so I mean they will be a challenge next season.
Right.
And we know the Champions League, it always comes down to the quarterfinals. It's the same 6 or 7 clubs at that stage. Real Madrid are a fantastic cup tournament team, as they've shown over the years. So you would never rule them out because they'll get through the group stages unless something surprising happens in the Champions League. Then it gets into knockout stages. So who knows? But they have lost a footing on the ladder. But especially if Neymar comes in, it's going to be a really interesting season. And don't rule out Atletico Madrid. They've had a huge overhaul, but things are looking good for them as well. And Simeone is ultra competitive, as we know. So you wouldn't want to meet them in Europe either. Okay,
Richard, it's great to talk to you. Good luck with your season. I know you're a secret Barcelona fan. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. That's Richard Fitzpatrick, and we'll be talking to Richard regularly during the season to find out what's happening, particularly at the 2 great Spanish clubs, Real Madrid and Barcelona, who've given us so much joy, pleasure over the years. Despite their present difficulties, I'm sure they'll be back